Welcome everybody. My name is Alicia Kearns. I'm a Customer Marketing Manager for Asia Pacific. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have two of LinkedIn's experts, Josh Colson and Claire Weeks, with us to talk about the 2015 Australia and New Zealand Talent Trends Report. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We'd just like to make sure that everybody is muted on the line. So we will have a Q&A at the end of the webcast, of course, so please send through any questions you may have throughout the session through the chat box to the right of your screen. We also have a hashtag. If you are sharing any content or posting through your social channels, please use the hashtag Talent Trends to share learnings and also thoughts about today's session. And as a reminder, the presentation and recording will be sent to you post this to share, obviously, refresh your learnings and share with your colleagues. So without further ado, I will pass over to Josh and Claire to take you through today's session.
Hi everyone, and apologies again for the late start. Let's kick on. So my name is Josh Colson. I head up the Insights team here at LinkedIn across Asia Pacific. I work with some of the region's largest companies, helping them with their talent problems using LinkedIn data. We've also got Claire here. Claire, what do you do on LinkedIn?
What do I do, Josh? Well, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name's Claire Weeks, and I work within LinkedIn's post-sales customer success team. So I get the excellent job of partnering with our existing clients to make sure they see strong ROI on the investment that they have purchased. My background is in HR and talent acquisition, so I've sat in most of the seats of the people who are joining us today. So really excited to walk you through the really interesting findings that we've had from our 2015 report.
Great. So what we're here to talk about today is we've recently concluded some research in the field. We've done this a global survey out to over 20,000 of our members on LinkedIn. And what the purpose of the research is to understand the attitudes, behaviors, opinions of professionals around the world when they're coming to think about their next job, their job-seeking behavior, what channels that they're looking for jobs in, even down to what they want out of a recruitment process. So we're really excited to actually share some of the insights with you today. We're going to take you through a bunch of stuff. Claire, what's on the agenda for us?
Yeah, Josh, it's a really packed agenda, but I think we're going to give some great takeaways for people dialing in today. So essentially we're going to do a bit of a deep dive as to what candidates want as they progress through their careers, and we'll also do a bit of a nod at the beginning as to the split between the active and passive talent across Australia and New Zealand, and also check out what's happening in the rest of the world. We're going to start with taking a look at the first outreach with talent. So what do people actually want to hear when you tap them on the shoulder and start the conversation about potentially joining your organisation? We're going to walk through what they then want when they begin to engage with you, and also what affects their decision-making process.
Great, and we're going to finish with some Q&A. And if you do have any questions throughout, make sure you put those into the chat box, and we'll make sure we get to those at the end. All right, let's kick off. Active and passive talent. Now, I know we've talked about this a lot in the recruitment industry over the last few years, especially here at LinkedIn, we talk a lot about passive talent. One of the most interesting things coming out of this research is that the active talent is actually increasing as a percentage of the as a percentage of professionals in the workforce, especially in Australia and New Zealand. I guess this is a global trend, but what we're really seeing is this is a reinforcement of a number of trends that have been happening over a long time around this. Really is the typical career path is more fluid than ever. We know that professionals, just like consumers, are more informed than ever. They're more connected. We're living in a digital environment where they're completely there's been no time like now where a potential candidate is going to know more about you before you reach out to them or during that recruitment process. There has never been a time like now where they can go in and research who they're potentially going to be working with, what it's going to be like on day one, and all of that information is at their fingertips. What this is really meaning is that the typical career path is no longer, we're not seeing that, the loyalty of the older generation around 20, 30 years at one organisation. Right now, the average tenure of professionals in Australia sits at around 4.5 years, and I think we're going to start to see that to further decrease in the next few years. So when it comes to that active talent, we saw that last year when we measured this statistic, active talent, and we we describe that as any professional who is actively looking for a job in the last 30 days. We saw that was for Australia and New Zealand seeing about 21%. So we've seen a remarkable increase to about 30% this year for Australia and New Zealand, and that's actually on par with the global trend at 30%. Claire, what are you saying? Why do you think that this is the case?
I think it's a really interesting data point to do a bit of a deep dive on, Josh. And to your point earlier that the workforce is now more connected and more informed, I think that the types of ways that people are approaching the market is also shifting. So the rise of the contingent or the temp or the contract workforce, the increase in people more comfortable with working remotely, the demands of the millennials who are entering the market, and the fact that we're now looking at skill sets that aren't actually in existence in businesses anywhere has all led to this increased shift in that increase in active candidates. So what's interesting is that having more active candidates can generally lead to an increase in inbound applications coming through to clients. So the customers that I work with are definitely seeing that people are more open to having these conversations and also leveraging their internal stakeholders to ensure that they're spreading a great message across the market.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, especially the point there about the increase in the active applicants and the number of applications companies are receiving through. I mean, I think companies are really starting, and recruiters are starting to get smarter about how they're dealing with those applications. You know, we're starting to see great technological solutions in filtering, in finding the best fit. And people that really work for that organization's culture. So that is really interesting, and I think that's exciting for the way we're heading towards in terms of how professionals are seeing themselves at future companies. I guess one of the big takeaways from our research was that I think there is a perception out in the marketplace that anyone who's actually applied for a job, a hard apply, any active applicant is actually, completely dissatisfied. But the research actually shows that almost half of all active candidates are actually satisfied in their current role. So it's not necessary that they're, dissatisfied. But when we look at the other part of it, passive candidates are definitely satisfied. So, when you are reaching out to passive candidates, and that's, going to be playing a larger role in organizations' talent strategy going forward, making sure that you're having a conversation that's not, always just about, what the role entails, but how can you actually make the messaging completely relevant and personalized for that person. Claire, I know you work with a lot of recruiters around this area. What do you find that works best?
It's really interesting, Josh. I'm starting to see a lot more of our clients tailor their message depending on whether they're reaching out to active or passive talent. And in a recent LinkedIn report that I saw that came out earlier this year, Australia and New Zealand both sat below the global average for customers who actually had a strategy to reach out in a different manner to passive talent. So really understanding the motivators. And to your point earlier, it's pretty interesting that people who are actively hunting for a new role, they're not dissatisfied. So you're not just competing against the other companies who might be wanting to take them. You're actually competing against their existing employees. So the message really becomes, what are we going to differentiate when you start to join and consider moving into different organizations?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So moving on, when we compare what's happening in Australia and New Zealand to global trends, really we're in line with what's happening in that active-passive split globally. There is a couple of countries, though, around the world where we're seeing very different candidate behaviour. One of those ones that I've been hiring in recently is actually India. We've had a couple of analyst roles over there, and the amount of inbound traffic that I've received on those roles has just been overwhelming. And the challenges are completely different to the Australian market or even the Southeast Asian market, where you have to go searching for high-quality candidates. The level of inbound activity is just fantastic, and it's completely different in terms of what the candidates are looking like in other markets. Claire, what are you seeing in terms of global? Is there anything interesting for you?
I've got a couple of clients that have either an APAC or a global remit, so they're actually taking time to figure out which areas of the world they're having to place more emphasis on attracting that passive talent and really swaying their decisions. So I know the Nordic regions are typically more satisfied in their current role and less likely to be an active candidate. So anybody wishing to bring over talent from that area of the world might have to tweak their message and really sell the benefits as to why candidates might want to consider Australia or New Zealand as a new location for them. Interestingly, Brazil, Russia and Japan also have a higher percentage of passive talent. So anybody looking to bring talent into our markets from that area of the world might want to consider what really piques the interest of those people. Is it the chance to enjoy sunshine in a different area of the world? Is it a chance to have a better work-life balance? So really understanding the number of applications that you're going to have from different regions around the world and the type of message that really might pique their interest to consider a bit of a shift.
All right, let's move on. Let's have a look at talent behaviour and career development and some of the attitudes and activities around there. Let's have a look at what professionals do. Now, let's have a very quick poll.
Poll question number 1, what do you think is the most popular channel globally where both active and passive talent goes to look for new opportunities? Now, we're going to ask you to just leverage the chat panel on the right-hand side and just input into the chat box what you think is the area that they go to take a look for new opportunities. You'll also notice to the right-hand side the option to tick the answer that you believe most accurately represents that question. So we'll just direct your attention to the right-hand side of the screen and let us know if you think it is word of mouth, if they go online, if they leverage job boards and social professional networks, if they look to company websites, or if they leverage professional groups. Well, the stats are coming in, and most people typically think that candidates go online to take a look at new opportunities globally. Well, you'll be pleased to know that you are absolutely correct. In the social and connected world that we're living in today, relationships, whether that's in person or online, are key at really driving the ways in which talent discovers those new opportunities and also finds out a little bit more about new companies. So if we think to what Josh mentioned earlier on in the conversation as to how connected we are and how mobile we are, it's really no different to how we discover what new restaurant we're going to eat at on a Friday night, what movie we're going to listen to, or which hotel we're going to book through our summer holiday. We always go by a word of mouth, and that power of influence that our network has is really undeniable. Talent also typically listens more to existing employees than the marketing blurb that companies are pushing out. So you can start to see that leveraging our networks and their experiences is really key in finding new career opportunities.
So I guess the big takeaway for me here is in having a look at the difference when we're talking about active and passive talent, as part of the research we had a look at and we asked our respondents, what are you actually doing what activities are you doing around professional development? You know, are you updating your resume? Are you networking? And some of the really interesting stuff for me here is that the actual number of people who are interested and actively nurturing and cultivating their professional development. We're seeing here that almost half of everyone is doing professional networking, researching job opportunities. Is still, over 40% of respondents are researching job opportunities. So even though we saw there previously only 30% of candidates or 30% of professionals are actively looking for work, even a lot of those passive candidates are still out there doing research. They're finding out about companies that they want to work for. They're researching you as a potential employer down the track. It really means that professionals, and it goes back to that, that career path fluidity that we're seeing an increase in. Professionals now more than ever are interested and actively working on their professional development.
Yeah, it's interesting, Josh. I know McKinsey coined the phrase the war for talent about a decade ago, and I think it's getting obvious that the candidate has won that war, and they really hold the power, and they really make the decisions as to when they're going to shift. So we've taken a look at the candidate's mindset and figured out what they consider when they're looking at a career transition, and also where they go when they're thinking about making a career transition. So let's talk a little bit more about what matters in that first conversation, and also how they should, they want the ice broken when you're reaching out and starting to develop relationships with them.
So what we asked was, we asked them, how interested are you in talking to a corporate recruiter, one of you out there, or a headhunter from a search and staffing firm? And what we found was that 75% of respondents actually said that they were interested. I guess, to be honest, this was actually quite surprising for me that we're seeing such a large proportion of the professional workforce who are interested in actually, looking at opportunities outside of where they are right now. And this is fantastic for everyone online as a recruiter. This means that, when you are outreaching to passive candidates or you're talking to those active applicants, they're going to be receptive to your messaging. I guess the one thing that we really need to make sure that is happening with this is that your outreach and that messaging is relevant and personalised for that candidate. I really think that, I remember when I got a email from the LinkedIn recruiter about 3 years ago to come and work here at LinkedIn. It was like that they'd read through my resume and were commenting on it, and it was incredibly personalised to me, and it felt, it was flattering. It was great. Claire, what do you think? What does this mean for recruiters?
What I think it means is don't be afraid to tap somebody on the shoulder or reach out to them. A lot of the clients that I start working with who are just moving into proactive sourcing or who are developing their social recruiting strategy typically think that it's difficult to get the attention of somebody who might not actively be looking for an opportunity. But I think this stat says that they do want to hear from you and that you shouldn't be afraid to reach out. What I would also comment from my time working with clients of LinkedIn is that the time that the candidate might take to respond to you is obviously going to be lengthier if you're a passive candidate. Now, I'm recruiting for my team at the moment and had emailed a couple of potentials in the market and hadn't heard back within a couple of days. So my mind naturally went to, oh, well, they've got my message, they've read it, they're not interested. But yesterday, which is about 2 weeks from when I sent the original message, I got a response back, and the candidate in question was very happy to have a conversation and, in fact, gave me some suggested days and times that we might be able to meet up for a coffee. So I would just say my top recommendations and takeaway from this data point is certainly don't be afraid to reach out to people just because they're not very active in the market. And also remember that it can take a little bit longer to pique their interest and for them to take time to respond to you.
All right, we're going to do another poll. What is the first thing talent wants to know when a recruiter reaches out to them? Is it A, why you're reaching out to them, B, the roles and responsibilities of the opportunity that you're presenting, C, projected salary range, how much you're going to pay them, or D, the company's mission? Maybe some Jeopardy music or something.
And you'll see those options appearing in the poll to the right-hand side of your screen, and please also feel free to pop your response into the chat panel if that's easier, and we'll give you a couple of moments to think about that. And then Josh and I will do the big reveal. Well, the data's coming through, and what are the audience thinking, Josh?
Yeah, look, and I think this really comes back to when we have a look at the results. You've got to keep it simple. These are really the basics. I think sometimes, some of the recruiters that I've talked to try to overcomplicate this to some extent. But the first thing that talent wants to know when a recruiter reaches out to them is why you're reaching out. It's not rocket science. And then going back in terms of the order of importance, make sure you're explaining the roles and responsibilities, the estimated salary range. It is important, especially for passive talent. When we look at what passive talent wants, when you're reaching out to them, they want to know about comp because they are completely satisfied right now. But company and culture and values is incredibly important. It's interesting to see there the difference between Australia and New Zealand. Australia is actually more interested in salary and comp rather than culture and values. I don't know what that says about us compared to the Kiwis, but we'll leave it for you to make some assumptions.
Josh, I think it's also important to start to think about how you're going to create that content in your initial outreach. And a lot of the clients that I work with start to think about how they can leverage what we call the in-mail functionality within LinkedIn Recruiter, which is the ability to send messages to people who are outside of your first-degree connection. So people typically say, well, I found this great person, I want to start engaging with them and networking, but what do I actually say? And I worked with a client in the FMCG industry recently who was having a low response rate to their in-mails. They were sitting at about 17% response, and we typically like to see clients sitting at a higher percentage than that. So we actually took a look at the content that they were putting out in their messaging and started to put in some best practices for their talent acquisition team. So we hit on three certain areas of their message that they were going to focus on, and number one was who they are, so a brief explanation of their particular role in the company, and also a bit of an outline of the company if it wasn't one that might be well known to the candidate. The second thing that we worked with them to hit in their message was why they were outreaching, and it's great to see that this is something that our respondents to the 2015 poll were really keen to find out about. So is it that you want to consider them for a new opportunity, or is it that you want to start networking with them, or just discuss instances of interest in the market that might apply to both of you? And the final piece that we entered into the email templates that we created was some kind of call to action. Sometimes I work with clients who've spent hours creating a really tailored and great message that's going to pique the interest of active and passive talent, but they failed to give any call to action. So we decided to say, you know, is there any times and dates that would work for an initial call, or can I meet you for a coffee at the end of the week, or, you know, are you going to a particular networking event that I'll be at, and could we meet up then? So having those who, why, and a call to action points in all of the emails actually meant that this particular client increased their response rate by emails from 17% to 35%, which was really key. Another tip that some of my clients have leveraged with great success is to also mention the hiring manager that the candidate would be working with if they are mentioning a particular role when they outreach. So particularly if you recruit in a niche marketplace, or there's specific skill sets, or that the talent in that industry tends to be very well networked. Sometimes just dropping in your hiring manager's name or a senior leader's name that's noticed the CV and wants to connect with them can also help increase that response rate. The final point that we implemented with this particular client is to understand that most of the people they were reaching out to, from feedback within their own business, was that they would be reading these messages via a mobile device. So with that 17% email response rate at the very beginning, we noticed that they were writing very lengthy messages, and it's just too hard. If you have to scroll more than a couple of times with your thumb on the phone and the way to work on a bus, you're probably going to get a no response. So we actually leveraged a really catchy subject line and tried to be as brief as possible while piquing their interest.
That's great, Claire. Some really top tips there and really tactical as well. I really like the call to action. I think that's been a long-term trend for me around how recruitment is starting to act more like marketing. I think that's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit about how to create an amazing interview experience. So what we did was ask our respondents in the research, we asked them what matters to you during the interview experience. We had a look at, first of all, who did you want to meet with? And again, we're going back to basics here. I think this is really, this is the simple stuff. Again, it's not rocket science, but making sure that they are meeting with the prospective manager. And you'll notice that a recruiter is actually at the bottom of the list there. That's not to say that they don't want to meet with you, but they want to make sure that they are meeting with relevant people to the actual role. At the end of the day, candidates are obviously trying to assess, and while we're trying to assess them, they're also trying to assess what it's going to be like on day one. Give them that opportunity. And again, when we go to what makes a great interview experience, making sure that there is that post-interview follow-up, whether or not that's feedback on why they've dropped out of the process or what's the next steps. And I love this. We also talk about, making sure that there is follow-up after the interview, and it doesn't necessarily even need to be, just keeping them in the loop about what's happening throughout the process. Claire, what do you think? What's important for you to make a great interview?
I'm a big fan of creating a really seamless interview experience for the candidate. So whether they actually land as a successful candidate or if they go out into the market as an advocate for you, making sure they had a seamless, excellent experience at all stages during the touch points is really key. And we've all had experience of or heard those horror stories of being told you're going to meet one person and suddenly facing up to a panel discussion or sitting in reception for half an hour because the person was running late. So really being key that every touch point and every experience that potential candidates have is particularly key. And I think the stats here show that talent wants to obviously get a really firm understanding of the business, but really importantly is to meet their prospective manager. It's likely that they will have had a number of communications with recruiters or the talent acquisition team leading up to an in-person session, but having the chance to meet the person that they'll be reporting into is really key. I think obviously with regards to the data on the right-hand side of the screen, so getting interview feedback post-meeting and getting business questions answered really speaks to the fact that leveraging and involving your internal stakeholders is key. So making sure your hiring managers understand the process and the journey that the candidate's gone into, and also their importance in making sure that the experience continues to be as seamless as possible. The stat at the bottom shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, but over 3/4 of candidates said that the interview experience is extremely or very important in their decisions. So it can be a real shifting point. And anybody who was at our Talent Connect conference here in Sydney a couple of months ago might have heard Jill from Airbnb speaking on the stage about the importance of the candidate experience. And from having a very poor candidate experience herself, she actually took a step back and mapped out entire candidate journey and every single touch point they have with the organisation. So anyone keen on finding out a little bit more about that can go to our 365 Talent Connect site and take a look. But they really focused on the NPS, so the Net Promoter Score of candidates going through the process. And what I really liked, and I've seen a couple of other clients do, is to get internal stakeholders to go through the application process themselves. And sometimes when it's you sitting in the hot seat and being made to upload a CV or a resume or a cover letter, or give every piece of data that the client thinks they need, can sometimes turn people off very quickly. I read a stat recently that said that for every click the person has to do, the actual people going through the funnel drops off by 50%, which I think is really key for making sure you're not only getting the right people into the funnel at the top, but you're keeping them engaged, the right people engaged on that journey through to engagement.
Claire, what I really liked about the Airbnb presentation at Talent Connect was the fact that they're using data to actually enforce and inform their recruitment process. I really like that. And for anyone out there who has not gone or not started down the journey of measuring what their recruitment process is and measuring NPS, some of these stats are actually a great start to that. This can actually help to inform and make sure that you're on the right path. But starting to measure some of these things are really simple. Sending a quick survey out to candidates, both successful and unsuccessful, is going to start to get you some really great feedback on what it's been like for them. Because at the end of the day, we've seen some great research recently about successful and unsuccessful candidates are going to be your customers. They're going to be potential candidates in the future. Having a negative experience can inform and enforce their potential purchasing behaviour in the future as well.
So our next piece of data talks about what happens after that face-to-face meeting. So what do candidates want to happen after they've met with you? And you can see from the information on the screen, talent wants to hear from you when you have an update. Again, not rocket science, but it definitely speaks to the fact that they want to be kept informed. And we spoke a little bit about Net Promoter Score, or NPS, and keeping that engagement, but it really does have an influence on your talent brand. So candidates who are going through the process, not all of them are going to be successful, but they will be advocating for you, hopefully, in the marketplace and touching other people who might become either customers of yours or future candidates of yours. I think it's really important to continue to consider people who aren't successful at their application as your quote-unquote silver medalists. So people who are successful in getting very, very close but might have just been picked at the post by somebody else. So keeping some kind of data on those and maintaining those talent communities and being able to communicate with them post-interview, even if they haven't been successful, be that through your own applicant tracking system or CRM or the pipeline functionality within Recruiter, means that you can keep tabs on them, so to speak, continue communicating with them, continue letting them know about why it's great to be engaged with your organisation, and then hopefully a role is going to come up in future and you've got that warm talent pool that you can dip into and consider for future opportunities.
So let's have a quick talk about the decision-making process, and we'll want to get to questions and answers as well. So here is the top factors that what we found that talent in Australia and New Zealand are considering when they're looking at a job offer. Number one in Australia and New Zealand is compensation. Look, we can't get away from the fact that comp has got to be as part of the conversation. But remembering that professional development and better work-life balance are still vitally important to candidates out there. We actually have this piece of research. If you get in touch with your LinkedIn representative, we can help you understand what this means for different segments of the market as well. This is some really interesting research that we have available for all our customers.
Yeah, and I think if we look back at some of the data points earlier in the research, particularly for our New Zealand market, the culture of the organisation that the candidate might be considering was particularly key. And you can see that it does, as you move through the awareness and engagement and offer stage, it does drop down the list, so it's less important. But I think if we understand that candidates will have done their due diligence, aligned themselves and identified with the culture on offer, that's almost in the kind of tick box area of their decision-making process, and then they start to get to the more juicy things like compensation. So what I also think is important is the stats that suggest that talents do also want to be contacted by a prospective manager post-offer, and that can actually help them to want to accept a job faster. So I think leveraging your internal stakeholders and ensuring that your hiring managers are key to both the interview and the offer and acceptance process is particularly important. So engaging them and ensuring that they're advocating and keeping in touch with potential candidates is also really, really important.
So, Claire, let's have a quick chat about our key takeaways from today. The first one for me was making sure that you build your company's brand to increase your mind share of both active and passive talent. What we're really trying to say here is that, as we saw, and I think this hasn't been any surprise to anyone, but that long-term shift of professionals' career development from that loyalty to one particular company for a long period of time to much shorter tours of duty, if you like, at various companies and a career spanning many companies means that talent branding and your company's brand in the marketplace is just so vitally important, and it's becoming more and more important. So making sure that you're building your company's brand, and there's so many different ways you can do that, there's so many different channels, but one of the most important ways is using your employees as ambassadors for your brand. What was your takeaway for today?
I think your point of understanding the channels of communication and the ways that candidates might be understanding your brand and what it's like to work in the organisation. So it will be obviously your internal existing employees, so making sure that they're loving what they're doing, but also the corporate website, making sure that's fully revamped and attractive to potential people landing on it. And also obviously any footprint that you have on social media, be that LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any of the newer ones coming out into the market, to make sure that the message is consistent and appropriate for all of the channels that you're leveraging. Our second takeaway is to include the most impactful information in your initial message. The unsurprising feedback within our data was that people want to know why you're reaching out to them. And I was very pleasantly surprised that that really resonated with the work that I'm doing with my clients at the moment, to understand the 3 top things that they should hit within their in-mail. So who you are and the organisation that you're representing, why you're reaching out, and then don't forget that particular call to action. So what do you want to come from your initial outreach to either an active or a passive talent in the marketplace?
And the last takeaway from me, Claire, is make sure you're partnering with stakeholders to build a great interview experience. So this is talking to hiring managers, to the peers of the potential candidate, and working with everyone to ensure that there's a seamless experience for them, and making sure that, I think it's Airbnb who said it was they want their candidates to have a fantastic experience or something like that. It was like the best day of their life. The more that you can be doing to actually make sure that candidate loves the interview experience, because they will be talking about to their friends and their family. And that is your talent brand. You know, all of those interactions with and those touch points with you as a recruitment team, that's your talent brand out. That's your reputation out there in the marketplace, and that's how you're impacting it.
I think respondents to our survey this year really shouted loud and clear that they want to be kept up to date throughout the post-interview process. So if it's going to take a week for you to get through all of your first round of interviews and then let candidates know where they stand, let the person know that when they're in your office. So give them some kind of time frame. Also, letting them know who will be reaching out to them can increase their comfort level, and letting them know the best way to reach you if they have any particular questions as to where they're going and how they fit within the process.
So, just moving on, you can download the full report. This webinar is a part of the Talent Trends full report, where you can download at one of the longest shortened URLs, lnkd.in/ANZ Talent Trends 2015. You can download the full PDF there. Also, any more information on some of the things we've discussed today, including how you can build your talent brand and use LinkedIn to further your outreach to potential candidates. Have a chat to your relationship manager. Talk to them about the report. Question them about the statistics. I'm sure they'll love that. We've got some time for questions. We've got some great questions coming through.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so had some amazing questions coming through. So from Rosemary, she's interested in finding out what a good benchmark is in regards to email response.
Yeah, great question, Rosemary, and definitely something that a lot of the clients are querying about. I typically look to start my clients with achieving a 20% response rate. Now, if you're leveraging the email functionality within Recruiter, you'll be given data as to the acceptance rate, the decline rate, and then the overall response rate. And most clients typically say, oh, I want my acceptance rate to be super high, but I generally say, guys, any response to your outreach is great. If the candidate says, yes, I'm interested, the conversation will continue. But even if they say, no, I'm not interested, that gives you some really interesting data as to A, why they're not interested, or B, allows you just to set a little reminder to maybe touch base with them in 3 to 6 months' time. So I would certainly say 20% is a bit of a benchmark for that response rate, and to try and increase by leveraging some of the tips and tactics that I mentioned previously.
What do you see as best in class there, Claire?
Good question, Josh. I've got some clients who send a slightly smaller amount, so the number that they actually send out into the market is lower, and they're probably sitting on a 50 to 60% response rate, which is incredibly high. And they've definitely leveraged some tips by working with their sales and marketing team to get some really interesting content, and also making sure that their subject line in their email is really strong to pique the interest. There's some really interesting things going on with people who are looking to bring talent into Australia or New Zealand, and maybe having a short, sharp question, you know, I see you're a fan of the beach, willing to chat. So really kind of selling the priorities of living in this side of the world as to why the person might want to open and respond to that email.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so we had a question from John, just wanting to get a bit of an understanding around how the data was collected for this survey, and also, I guess, some of the sample sizes, demographics.
Yeah, thanks, John. So this survey went out to, we had 20,000 respondents globally, and I had the numbers earlier on the slide, and thank you, Claire, we're so prepared. This is wonderful. We had over 1,400, if I can do my maths, respondents in Australia and New Zealand, and we went out and asked professionals about what they were looking for in their new job. John, and anyone else who's interested, there is a lot more information about the methodology and the survey methodology and the questions that were asked in the report, which you can download from lnkd.in/ANZ Talent Trends 2015.
Well remembered, Josh.
Alicia, any more questions coming through?
We certainly do. So basically, there are some questions around engaging hiring managers. So this is something that's becoming increasingly top of mind for talent acquisition. So I guess you know, where are some tips and tricks as to how to engage these guys earlier in the process?
Yeah, it is a bit of a hot topic at the moment, Alicia, so great question. I think when we're trying to engage our internal stakeholders and hiring managers, we almost need to flip our priorities on their heads and let them know what's in it for them. So generally the main point we start at is why should they have a really robust built-out LinkedIn.com profile? And the obvious answer is that when talent is doing their due diligence, they're likely going to click through to different members of the organization and find out a little bit more about that. So making it really easy by providing them, you know, brown bag sessions at lunchtime and letting them come in and bring their laptops and take a look at their profiles. And also sharing data like this with hiring managers and internal stakeholders to let them know the importance of the part that they can play within really encouraging candidates to consider you as a great place to work.
Yeah. Claire, as a hiring manager myself, this is something that, you know, MyRecruiter does a great job of reaching out to me and really partnering with me, and I would describe the relationship as a partnership rather than, you know, the recruiter working for me. And it is seamless. You know, we collaborate at least once a week. We sit down and look at profiles together. We go through some talent pool analysis, looking at what analysts look like, what skills we're going after, what criteria. So that when they're on the phone to potential candidates, it's like an extension of my team, and I really like that partnership.
Absolutely.
So, Josh, we do have a question around employee tenure. So I think you called out a stat a little bit earlier to reduce from 4.5 years currently. What makes you draw this conclusion? That's coming from Gordon.
Yeah, I think that's a long-term trend, Gordon. I think previously, and I don't have any analysis to hand, but it would be some interesting analysis to do with that, you know, that decrease in loyalty to a particular company, and you know, where we will see the average length of tenure going in the future. You know, there's all that research and whinging, I'm going to call it, around the millennial generation at the moment about, you know, their wants and needs. You never know though. That's my prediction for the next 5 to 10 years. But you know, we could see millennials turn out to be more loyal than anyone else.
Okay, I think that's about all questions for today, and I think we're closing up to the end of time as well. So, I guess any final thoughts from yourself, Josh or Claire?
No, hopefully this webinar has been useful and informative. I apologise for the technical difficulties we had earlier on. And again, if you would like more information, download the 2015 Australian and New Zealand Talent Trends Report at that URL there on your screens. Or Claire, we can talk to our relationship managers as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for dialing in, and I hope we gave you some interesting tips and tricks and insights that will help you start to engage the market.
I have seen a flood of questions come through at the end, so we will spend some more time online just responding to you guys as well. So thank you again, everybody, for your time, particularly for your patience at the beginning of the session. We hope you found it informative, and we look forward to speaking with you again about either recruiting or talent trends in the next 6 to 12 months. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.